Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a pretty eclectic brunch. We've got some pumpkin donuts with some different glazes, English muffins, spiced apples, and then we're going to make a really small mini kind of cheese and sausage omelet so that we can put some of those on our English muffins. So kind of eclectic, but lots of fun and deliciousness. So let's start by let's get our first kind of batch of English muffins going on our skillet. I've got it starting to warm up here. I've got these proofing in my oven, nice and warm. So this is some sourdough English muffin dough that I made up last night. I cut them out into circles this morning, put them on our cornmeal, and now they're ready to go and toast up. These you kind of cook nice and slow on your skillet over like a medium heat. And they're going to steam cook inside. So you kind of toast up the outside and then you steam cook them in the inside. So they take a hot minute, especially the first round, because the first round is all about like heating up the skillet to the appropriate temperature. But these are the best English muffins. They're better than store-bought ones. Let's see if I can get one more on here. I always try to keep them kind of towards the center because that's where my direct heat's going to be. And again, I've got them kind of over a medium heat here. Now, this first round will take forever, which is why we're putting them on. But once that skillet gets nice and hot, it will go down and take a lot less time. Okay, let's whip up. We're going to do a half batch of our pumpkin donuts instead of a full one since we've kind of got a little bit of everything here. So we are going to start out with a half a cup of pumpkin puree. And also the reason I'm doing this is then it leaves me about a cup of pumpkin puree to make something else with pumpkin later. Because each one of these cans, I want to say, is like 1 2/3 cup of pumpkin on there. So we're going to start off with just about a half cup. That looks pretty good. And then I'll save this. We'll take a spoon back for another wonderful recipe later, like pumpkin bread, which is one of my favorites. Okay, so we got a half cup of pumpkin puree. Then we're going to add in 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Here we go. And a half a cup of firmly packed brown sugar. And if you want a richer molasses flavor, you can use dark brown sugar. Light brown sugar is going to give you a little, less of that molasses flavor, but you want to use the brown sugar. It really kind of enhances the pumpkin. Okay, we're going to kind of cream the butter, the pumpkin, and the sugars, or the sugar together. And then we will add in our egg, our spices, and our vanilla. So I always want to make sure we get this mixed in well. And make sure you use pumpkin puree and not pumpkin pie filling. Here we go. And now we're going to add in 1 egg. We're going to do like a teaspoon, a little over a teaspoon and a half of baking powder. Let's see if I can get all of this in here. So 1 teaspoon, and that looks like there's going to be about a half in there to finish off that can. And we'll add in 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. If your pumpkin pie spice is from like the year before, add a little bit more. Over time, your spices don't necessarily go bad, but they do dull out. So if it's not freshly bought, it's going to be more muted. And so you want a little stronger of that flavor. So 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we'll do a half a teaspoon of salt. And now we're going to mix these in, and then we will add in our flour. But I always like to do all of my ingredients first. That way we can mix it well and then add in our flour. Because if you try to mix with the flour in it, you risk over mixing, and over mixing is going to give you a denser donut. And these are like old-fashioned like cake donuts. So we're going to mix until we have all of that baking powder and the spices blended in. So if you see any clumps, just kind of press them out at the edge of your bowl. Here we go. And now we should have our nice kind of mixture. And there we go. And now we're going to add in 1 cup of flour. And now this is going to, since this is a butter-based batter, it's going to be a thicker batter. So it's not going to be super runny, but that's also allows it to kind of hold its shape well in the donut maker. So we're going to mix it in. Just be careful again not to over mix your donuts. Here we go.
A 2-part question. Did we stream last night, and are we streaming tonight?
We did not stream last night, so Evie's soccer game went a little bit late, but then she got the game-winning goal. And then she asked if she could have Chipotle for dinner, and I was like, you know what? You got the game-winning goal. Of course, you can have Chipotle for dinner. So we changed our dinner plans to let the little soccer player have what she wanted. It was a pretty amazing goal. She created a corner kick by taking a shot, and then the goalie deflected it out on where did I put my spatula? Right over here. The goalie deflected it out, and then she took her corner, which then the first corner she took, the other team's player deflected it out. And then she had this really beautiful one where she arced the ball, and as it arced the ball, it nicked one of their players' shoulders and went into the goal. So she got like one of those special, I think, Olympico goals or whatnot. But it was a really beautiful goal in the last few minutes of the game to win it. Okay, looks like I've got 2 of them ready to flip. You know when they're ready to flip over when they have this nice toasty brown edge on our English muffins. On there. So if they don't quite have the toasty brown edge, don't flip them over yet. Looks like these 4 need just a smidge longer. I'll steam it here, but it was such a thing. But we will stream tonight. We have a couple games. We have a game this afternoon, but we will be home for dinner tonight. Okay. I've got my donut ready. We're ready to put our first batch in. I'll let it warm up for just a second. Let's get our apples going. That way we can go put them in there because this is a half batch, so we're not doing as many. I want my apples going because they take a little hot minute to cook up, but I'll go on here. I'm going to quarter my apples. I love a good, let me turn this down just a smidge. I must have bonked it. There we go. They take a little longer to cook up, but we'll get them going. I just felt like, pumpkin donuts, spiced apples, English muffins. That sounds good. Sounds very fall-y. We're going to take out our core here. Now, I always like to peel my apple skins because I don't like the apple skins when they cooked up. They get really chewy. They don't like disintegrate. They're not as nice as like a pear. So give them a peel. If you don't mind the skin, of course, keep them with it on, but better product, peel them. So I'm going to take out their core here, and then we'll peel it, and then we'll just spice these up. I'm going to do an apple cider spiced apples, but if you don't have apple cider, you can use lemon juice. There we go. Starting to get some of that nice toasty brown on here. Beautiful. And you see how nice and fluffy they get? I'm going to turn it down. Now that my skillet's nice and hot, I'm turning it down to a 3. Again, you got to heat it up, but you got to bring it down once it gets hot, or you're going to get a darker end on it. Now, these are pretty hard to burn up because they can take a lot of heat on there, but you want to go slow so that they steam all the way inside, so you don't have a doughy English muffin. But they're really simple, and that's all that really takes to cook. So I whipped up this dough last night, and I used about a half cup of starter with a cup of milk, a tablespoon of honey, around a teaspoon of salt, 3 cups of flour, and you just kind of knead it together. It's not a high hydration dough. It comes out more looking like a regular dough, and you knead it for good things, and then you just cover it and you let it sit overnight. And then about an hour before I whip these up, I like kind of stretch them out into a nice flat surface and cut them out, and then I put them in my oven to proof, and then they puff up a little bit more. And then when they're, of course, when you cut them out is when you sprinkle them with a little bit of cornmeal, which gives them that grit so that they come up off the pan really easy and don't stick. Okay, we'll get a couple of these going in our thing that way, and then I'll finish up cutting up the rest. So I'm just going to put them in my little, 1.5 quart sauce pot here. I'll fish it out. There's always a little seed. Of course, if you can get it. I always, growing up, if I ever swallowed a seed, my brother's always been like, you're going to have an apple tree grow inside your stomach. And I always thought that. Now, you realize that's preposterous and no way a plant could go inside. Although I do remember reading a story about somebody who'd swallow like something, but it got implanted in their lung. And so it actually like grew a little, like almost like sprouted in there. Here we go. We've got them going, flipping over. We're getting, this is about if you've ever seen an English muffin, you want this kind of brownish speckling on it. And I like to flip it over to kind of allow it to get a little bit more steam heat on there. But again, nice and low. All right, let's get our back burner on here. I'm going to start it on like a medium high around a 7. Let's add in a smidge of butter. I find the butter just makes for a nice smoother apple, and especially when you mix in a little bit of cornstarch to give you that nice kind of jelly texture. The butter takes away the powdery kind of flavor of the cornstarch. So about a teaspoon, you don't need a whole lot. And then we're going to add in our apple cider, about a tablespoon or so. You don't need a lot. I find the apple cider gives it more of an apple flavor than the lemon. Lemon gives it tart, but apple cider gives it a really strong apple flavor. We got that, and then let's get our brown sugar in here. And then we're going to add in, since these, if you have a tartar apple, you need a bit more sugar for the sweetness. But since these are just like Pink Ladies or Galas, they're already mildly sweet. So I'm just going to add in about a half a cup of brown sugar. Granny Smith, I would say closer to 2/3 because they are very tart on there. Let me grab, I've got a spoon right here. Give this a good stir, and then we're going to add in some pumpkin pie spice because I feel like that's going to make a really delicious spiced apples that these flavors are going to go to. So let me grab that. We're just going to put in about a teaspoon. There we go. We'll let those simmer and up. These are looking pretty good. I do a little rotation around, make sure they all get kind of this nice even heat on it, but looking beautiful. Okay, we're going to peel up these last 3 apple bits, slice them up, throw them in there, and then we're just going to let those kind of cook over that nice medium heat for a good hot minute. We'll put our first batch of our donuts in our nice warm donut maker. Now, if you don't have a donut maker, you can use the donut baking sheets at 350, and they take about, depending on whether they're mini donut baking sheets or the full size, they're going to take between, I want to say 10 and 15 minutes. For the bigger ones, they're going to take a little bit longer than for the smaller ones. There we go. Now we'll Give this a good mix around. I won't add the cornstarch in for our spiced apples until the very end once they're nice and tender so it doesn't thicken up yet. Let me grab a spoon. It makes it a little bit easier to scoop this batter out. So here you can see we've got this lovely thick batter. If again, you're gonna do a baking donut baking sheet at home, you're going to want to put it in either a Ziploc baggie or a piping bag so you can pipe it into it. But for a donut maker, you just need to dollop it in and it will press it into the donut shape. You don't need a whole lot, just like kind of a spoonful for each one. If you overfill it, that's going to cause them to kind of burst out of their mold. So always air and kind of just enough amount. I always find a kitchen spoonful is the perfect amount. We'll get there and then we'll go back. I think I'll need a little bit more and one more. But once it kind of closes it up, they have these little grids on there that kind of steam cooks it and it will puff up and it's just going to be amazing. And that butter in there that we added in there will melt up again. Okay, let's set these to the side. Let me give my hands a quick wash. And let me check out my English muffins here. Beautiful. They are all looking pretty fabulous. Nice. Perfect. Now I always do this is my English muffins on, I think this is about a 2-inch, maybe a 2.5-inch cutter. You can definitely do the bigger English muffins if you want to, like a 3-inch one, which is typically what you buy at the store. But I find the 2-inch ones are perfect for like my kids and everything like that because it's just like you can have a savory one, you can have one with jam, make it, or honey and butter. So you can kind of have it both ways. So we've got our first round of our English muffins going. I thought about making a lovely pumpkin butter to put on it, but that's something you have to kind of plan in ahead because pumpkin butter needs to cook for a long time, just like apple butter. But I was like, oh, that would be so good in the English muffins. I might, after Halloween, I have a bunch of heirloom pumpkins, and heirloom pumpkins you can actually bake up. And so, regular carving pumpkins, that pumpkin base isn't as good, but heirloom has a nice dense one. So I might bake up a bunch and make some pumpkin butter there or make a bunch of pumpkin puree.
Do you have a question? Are these recipes posted anywhere?
So I have, I believe I have the pumpkin donut recipe available for our members, as well as I'm not sure about the English muffin ones, but I'm pretty sure I have those available for our members too. Now we do post all of our lives on the link on our page, so you can always recreate these recipes by just going and rewatching the video. I make sure I go through every single step as I'm cooking it so that people can truly recreate them along the way. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit of butter right here going so we can kind of saute up our sausages for our mini little omelets that we'll put in some of our English muffins. Here we go. And then I think I'm going to take a quick peek, but I think they still need a little bit. Yeah, they still need a little bit. I'm looking for a nice kind of slightly golden one, but they're almost there. So let's start whipping up some of our frostings, or not frosting, glazes. We're going to do a nice kind of brown sugar glaze. I'm going to grab, because I want to use this for one of ours. Grab an extra one.
You got another question on your timeline for your cookbook?
Hopefully in 2026. But we do have recipe cards out for our members. We send out about 3, sometimes 4 every single week for them, using a lot of the recipes that we made up during the week. That way I kind of go at baby steps at a time. So we always have those available for our members on there. Yes, we right now have 80 recipe cards already posted. So there is a good amount. And I always try to pick out what seems to be everyone's favorite meal, or what was my favorite meal during the week, or treat or dessert or whatnot. Okay, I've got my butter back here melting. This is going to be for my brown sugar and pumpkin spice glaze on here. So I've got my butter. Once it melts, we're going to add in our brown sugar, and then we'll add in cream and whatnot. But let's get our maple glaze going up. So we're going to start with our maple with about 2 tablespoons or so of cream. And then we're going to do 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, and you got to use real maple syrup. So 1, 2, because that just gives it, it makes it not overly sweet. We're going to give this a good little mix. Here we go. And I'm going to add in a little bit of pumpkin pie spice, like a teaspoon. There we go. Let me give this a nice stir. I'm going to turn it down a little bit lower now that it's got a good bubble on it. Oh. Get some of these flipping over. And then we're going to get our pumpkin donuts out here. Beautiful. Now they've got this nice kind of golden brown. I'm going to grab a little bit of a fork to pop them out because they are a little bit hot, but not super hot. And I'll just put them right here on our little drying rack here. And I have this drying kind of rack out or cooling rack out so that they will, when we glaze them, they'll drizzle down. So we've got them going right there. I'm going to put my next batch in so they can cook up while we wait. And then I'll finish making up our glaze. You want to glaze your donuts while they're warm, not super hot, or the glaze will completely run off, but while they're warm. That's going to allow them to really stick on and coat them up well. Here we go. And then
You have a question? Where do you get the donut maker?
So this is a relic of the past. They don't make this model anymore. I got it back in college in 2007. But Betty Crocker makes one that is almost the exact same. I have that in my Amazon storefront. And that one's relatively cheap too. It's like 20 bucks. Okay, I've got my butter melted. I'm going to remove it from the heat, and we're going to add in our brown sugar. You don't want your brown sugar, you don't want to cook it for too long. That's why I'm removing it from the heat. If your butter's warm, it will help it dissolve. So we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, maybe a little bit more to make that. And we're going to whip it there. That's going to be the lovely base to our brown sugar glaze. So you got the butter in here, but again, you don't want to heat it so much that the brown sugar turns to candy. I've made that mistake before, and it goes really fast. We're going to add in a little bit of pumpkin pie spice as well. A little bit more. I'm going to get this nice and mixed up. Once I add the cream in here, I will pour it out into my bowl. We're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of cream. This is going to give a nice thicker consistency to our brown sugar glaze. And we're going to mix it up. And that cream is going to allow it to dissolve into this nice kind of brown sugar, creamy, sweet base. Here we go. Give it a good mix. And now you can see we've got this nice brown, creamy brown sugar syrup with that pumpkin pie spice. You can also use cinnamon in here if you want. Now, if you've noticed that you've got like little hard bits in there, that's because you've overcooked your brown sugar. So I always find just melt your butter, remove it from the heat, but you still want your pan hot, and then you put it in here. Here's our maple cream and pumpkin pie spice. So this will have a nice maple flavor to it. And then we're going to add in our powdered sugar. Let's first check these guys. They are cooking up well. Our sausage right here. Let me move this to my smaller base. There we go. We've got my butter nice and heated up. We're going to throw on a couple of sausages that we will then break up. These are already pre-cooked sausages, but we'll just cook them up and then we'll break them into little bits to add on to our English muffins. And I might cook an extra few to leave them whole in case somebody wants just a sausage biscuit or sausage English muffin. Okay, let me give my hands a quick wash. Here we go. We've got our English muffins toasting up right here. Again, these are all sourdough, and they're just lovely. Let me grab my powdered sugar, and we're going to mix them into our glazes. But while we have these ones nice and warm, our first ones we're going to do, I'm going to take some room temperature butter, and I'm just going to rub it over the top of each pumpkin donut. And this one's going to be a cinnamon sugar donut. So, and this, you can also brush melted butter on here as well, but I find just rubbing room temperature butter over the top makes it perfect. And that's going to allow our cinnamon sugar to stick on, which we eat a lot of cinnamon sugar. So we're just going to sprinkle it on. And these are kind of like your old fashioned, you know, cider donuts, but pumpkin spice donuts here. There we go. So we've got our cinnamon sugar donuts here. Now we're going to whip up our glazes. I'm going to add about a half cup of powdered sugar to each one of these mixtures. And then I might need a little bit more depending on it, but you want a nice kind of consistency of glue. So if it's a little bit runny, add a bit more, but always start with less powdered sugar to get the right consistency. So we're going to add a little bit more. There we go. That's getting close to it. And that way we can dip our donuts in here. There we go. So we've got this kind of nice kind of drizzle on it. Beautiful. And now let's mix in our brown sugar and butter with a little bit of pumpkin pie spice in it. So it has a nice kind of darker color from that. And then we'll check on our pumpkin donuts here in just a second, but I think they still need a little bit longer. Beautiful. So we've got our two glazes here. Yeah, getting there just about, I want to say like 30 seconds more. Let's check these guys out. Flip them over. Beautiful. And you can see they're just getting nice and puffy and pillowy, which is wonderful. That's them steaming inside and cooking the inside of our thing. Okay, let's give our apples a quick stir. As you can see, they are getting nice and tender and soft. I'm going to turn them down even more. They're getting less opaque and more translucent, meaning they're getting a little bit more, you know, see-through. Let's get our sausages flipped. Beautiful. Got this nice kind of golden butter crust on them. Cook them through. Let's get our next batch of donuts off.
You have a question for the glaze. Does it matter if you use regular sugar or confectionery?
You've got to use confection sugar or the glaze won't, it will be very gritty, and that you have to do a whole different method if you're going to use regular sugar, as in you've got to cook it to make it. So you've got to use confectioner. So we've got it. Boom, boom, boom. I always poke my little finger through the hole to make them pretty. So we've got our next one. I'm going to pop in before we glaze those. I'm going to get our last batch of pumpkin donuts in here, which I don't know if it will fill up completely this whole thing, but we're going to get as many out as we can. And again, this is a half batch to my recipe. And honestly, this recipe is based off of my banana donut recipe, which is a family favorite in here. I just switched out a couple of ingredients, add some different spices, but it's almost the same base. Here we go. So full recipe makes about 24 donuts, and that's essentially what we've got here. We've got a little, I'm about to be able to make a dozen with, looks like, a partial one. So I'm going to see if I can scrape and get as much out here to fill this up as a whole. There we go. So we don't want any of our pumpkin donut to go to waste. There we go. Down to the last drop. Beautiful. Okay, that one probably won't be a full-size donut in there when it cooks up, but it's still going to taste just as good. Okay, while we've got our glazes, our donuts probably have cooled down enough to where we should be able to hold them and dip them. So, and while they're nice and you want to do it while they're warm so that the glaze will ooze over and not stay on thick like a frosting. You want it to be kind of thinned out on there so you get this way, but you don't want it as thick as a frosting. Here we go. And this is why I do it on a cooling or like a cookie cooling rack with a baking sheet underneath, because as you see, it's going to drip. The extra is going to drip under it. Otherwise, you'll have this big puddle, and you don't want that big puddle. It gives you the perfect amount of glaze. Not too much where you can't, you know what I mean? Like it's just super sweet. Okay. These are getting down to the last little bit on there. We'll finish them up. Again, you want to go super low with the cooking temperature. So that's on about a 3. Let's get these out so that we can start making our little mini cheese omelet. That will take us just about 2 seconds, and everything should be done here in the next few minutes. So I'm going to turn this off while we're waiting. I've got my sausages here. Some of them I'm going to kind of chop up, and then I'll leave a couple for those who want to just have like a sausage English muffin or straight up sausage. I'm going to keep, I've got this nice, lovely sausage grease in there. That's what we'll cook our omelet in to give it some great flavor. We're just going to do a good old 2-egg omelet, so nice and small. Mainly because I am completely out of eggs today, which is why we did a kind of an eclectic one, but delicious nonetheless. I rarely run out of eggs. I don't even know how I ran out of eggs because not even 2 weeks ago, I bought 5 dozen eggs, plus I already had 2 dozen eggs here. So in the last 2 weeks, we've gone through 7 dozen eggs, which is a pretty amazing feat, but we are a big family and eggs are delicious. Okay. You want to, for your omelet, you want to make sure you whisk up your egg first. It's not like with a scrambled egg where you want to put it in. I'm going to bring my heat back on nice and low. And we are going to add just a small pat of butter to it because I always like to make sure I have enough in there so that it gets this nice kind of crust on it. Here we go. Beautiful. Let's get our apples here. Look at that. You can see, I'm going to turn it down even lower, that syrup in there from that apple cider and the brown sugar and the butter has turned into a nice kind of sticky glaze on our apples, which will be wonderful.
A quick question. How many are you cooking for?
So we are cooking for, we've got our 7 today that are kind of eating here, and they're all going to kind of take different things. So Evie and Teddy love the English muffins. Torrin and Jack love the donuts. I will say everybody but Lena likes the spiced apples, which they'll get a little bit of the spiced apples. And I want to say my oldest daughter, she's the omelet kind of person. So they all have a little bit of it. But this is like kind of one of those things where like I've got a bunch of half ingredients, guys, to make things. So it's like it's why it's eclectic, you know? I was like, I got to go grocery shopping, but we'll use what we have in our house to kind of make sure everybody gets fed before we run out for our soccer game. Okay. Kind of go around. I'm going to keep my omelet nice and slow and low on here. And then once it's kind of firmed up on the bottom, what I'm going to do is then I'll use my spatula to kind of flip up the tops and let that kind of go down underneath. Okay, let's see how these are going. Just a little bit longer. See that one, it wasn't quite full, so it gives you kind of the Frankenstein one, but it was enough to make a lovely donut. And you can see, sometimes you misfill them and they're not completely there, but look at that. So you see how you get that glaze on both sides and it kind of runs down there? That is why you want to put it on there, because it completely covers it, but it doesn't puddle it. Okay, let's see how these are just about. Beautiful. Okay, I think we can start sliding this batch off. We'll turn off. And I will say the key really to this, so that they don't stick to your pan, is your cornmeal. That cornmeal, it gives it a grit. You don't use any butter on your skillet, just a hot skillet. And that's what's going to toast these up. But look at this batch of English muffins here. Nice little baby ones, so you can not feel guilty about eating more than one. Here we go. And turn off my back apples. And now that my thing has a little bit of a base here, we've got our nice little sausage bits in here. I'm going to kind of slide it around. You can see how I've got such a non-stick pan where my egg omelet is just moving with it. But I always like to take it up a little lip like this. This allows it so you don't get too burnt of a crust of the bottom layer of your egg, and you slide it under. Here we go. And this, I think, makes the best omelet. You can always do the method where you put the lid on and you steam it, but I feel like that makes a very poofy omelet. Okay, turn this down nice and low. We'll give it a little bit longer. Let's get our next batch of these guys out. Here we go. Let's see, do they? No, they're good. And we'll let them cool for just a second before we glaze them. That way our fingers don't get burnt trying to hold them. But it's a good kind of small batch on here. Okay. Our omelet base looks like it's pretty darn good here. So let me grab a couple sausages and just chop them up. And then I'm just using a good old cheddar cheese triple blend here. We're going to put some on the little base. We'll sprinkle our sausage in. And then I kind of like to sandwich the meat between cheeses. So again, I'll sprinkle a little bit more on top. Just like that. Don't go too crazy on the cheese or it will be like cheese overflow. And then look, we'll fold it up over. Beautiful. You've got those nice little sausage bits, which is going to add a lot of great flavor to our omelet, as well as the cheese. I'm going to turn this guy off. Let it sit on that residual heat here. Let's dip our last little muffin, or not muffins, our donuts here, and we can get them ready. And I will say one of my kids' favorite things with the glazes is they love to just come over here and eat the glaze afterwards. Teddy's always like, where's the glaze? Here we go. This is, again, my brown sugar and pumpkin pie spice. So you've got to kind of melt the butter and the brown sugar, and it gives a really lovely, rich kind of caramely flavor to it. And then this is a very delicate maple and pumpkin pie spice glaze. So you get that maple flavor, but it's not that overly strong maple flavor, which is wonderful because I'm not a big fan of such a strong maple one. If you do like it stronger, instead of using just maple syrup, you can add a little bit of maple extract. Okay, guys, let's do this. I actually feel like this cooked down enough to where we don't need to add any cornstarch because it made a lovely sticky syrup on it. So let's get ready to serve up our breakfast here. So I'm going to grab a plate. And let's see, where can we slide this out here? Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab, I gotta get a little knife so we can cut our English muffin open.
You have a question. Can you keep the donut glaze in the fridge?
You definitely can. Now, the one with the brown sugar in it, that you won't work as well, but the maple glaze will. The brown sugar one, the butter will congeal up and it will thicken up, so it won't work. Okay, let me get all of my stuff over here. And Loki, yeah, stop making that weird noise. And my little thing. Okay. So let's do our things. Got all of that. Let me grab my spatula for our omelet. So I like to kind of do our English muffins in kind of two different ways. Look at that nice steamed bubbly inside for it. We're gonna add on a part of our omelet on here. So you have almost like an English muffin breakfast sandwich. So a nice cute little English muffin breakfast sandwich. You can also do the English muffins. I also love them with the spiced apples inside, or you can do it with butter and a jam of yourself. But again, look at that beautiful bubbly inside from being steamed. So if you put the spiced apples on here and then a little bit of butter, or you could also do like a cream cheese if you wanted to, but the butter on there makes these just fabulous. Then we have our trio of donuts. We've got our cinnamon sugar pumpkin donut, our maple glazed pumpkin donut, and then my absolute favorite is the brown sugar and pumpkin spice glazed donut. And they're all got that pumpkin base, but they'll have all very different flavors from the different glazes. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that page, search for what we made. So we've got English muffins and pumpkin donuts, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my hex cut pans, my all cut pans, knives, cutting boards. I have the newest model of this, which is a Betty Crocker one that is red in there as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.